where does it start and where does it stop? And you've got concepts out there. Remember, Google scanned all the books for the digitization. Okay, that was deemed fair use. Okay, so now you got Midjourney using I think it's the diffusion model, where it's technically copying images to then learn on what is that, right?
I was hoping you could just explain to me exactly what you do and how that whole situation plays out, and then I'll have a ton of questions for you.
Yeah, well, sounds perfect. And I think, look, this is an interesting little kind of sub-industry that's been there for a long time, but effectively taking university research and benefiting society is difficult, right? You can publish a paper, I guess, and teach people. That's one way to do it, and certainly that's kind of the foundation of our educational system. But there's this technology transfer concept that we tend to point to and say that that's really what needs to happen more. And so, I spend a lot of time, I'm a practicing attorney, and a lot of my clients, I'm in Austin, Texas, so everyone's got a startup, including me. But the struggle is to leverage innovation, and when it's coming out of a university, it really is there's a set of challenges with that, and it's hard to explain sometimes without really getting in the weeds as to what are the true motivations of each of us. Okay, so say I'm a university professor, it's going to look one way. That's why I decided to get into academia, versus if I'm a entrepreneur and I've started a company, it's going to look, it's going to be a completely different picture, and I'm going to have completely different goals and objectives. And it's literally an oil and water situation. And so I'm trying to make that all work for the benefit of mankind is something that I've worked with for, almost 25 years. So going back to those early days, it really began with kind of watching a university, my alma mater, start an office that's meant to commercialize technology. Okay, and they're basically looking into the institution and saying, "Hey, everyone, send us your cool inventions, and we'll go do something with it and make you all a lot of money." Well, they don't care about that, right? That's not why faculty researchers went into university setting. And so I got to watch all that blow up in the faces of the administration, and as they tried to get a program propped up and running that would essentially do this function. And since then, I've gone in with a venture capital company that's taken advantage of these opportunities, and even more recently, I've gotten into the private law practice, and so a lot of what I do is represent companies doing deals with universities. I represent universities as they do deals with companies. We represent joint ventures where they all throw in certain tools and try to do something together. Corporate initiatives where big companies come in and fund entire wings of an institution's department and try to do it that way. It's really cool when it works. The problem is it hardly ever works. And so, you got to point to the reasons why, figure out how you can do better next time. And often there's common issues with most of the failures that I like to point to and say, see, we can't do that. We need to be doing something different. And so at a high level, this technology transfer industry, so to speak, is a continually evolving one that's trying to mix this oil and water.
I can't speak much from the college perspective, largely because I didn't go. But my siblings went. They became doctors and scientists and stuff. But I just got into programming right out of school, and I said, this is what I'm doing. But so I do have the entrepreneurial aspect of it. And so I will ask, if I'm an entrepreneur, say a tech entrepreneur or a science entrepreneur, and you said a lot of times this doesn't work out. It's a real difficult situation. But let's say I'm fishing for opportunities. Maybe I just sold my company and I'm fishing for opportunities. What would a you said sometimes it does work. What are some traits or some things an entrepreneur can look for within these programs or within these university systems? And how would they recognize that it's a good match or a good deal?
Right. So it's tricky. So you as an entrepreneur, you're going to have a focus in a certain technology. So let's just consider there being an innovation or an interest in taking advantage of certain innovations in a certain field.
Let's say lasers.
Lasers.
Just make it up. Yeah, I'm interested in lasers.
Yeah, you're interested in lasers. And so I can tell you right now, there's certain institutions across this nation that have expertise in lasers. There are the world's foremost laser experts located in some of the halls of our academic institutions. And so you then identify where these strengths lie, okay? And they could be at state institutions, at private institutions, at non-academic research institutions. They're everywhere, right? And so if you're going to trade functions, certain areas of expertise, you will learn kind of where your experts are. And so then you can kind of tag along and say, okay, well, this one goes to MIT. Well, I happen to know that MIT is well developed in their ability to engage in this technology transfer exercise. So the next step would be, once you've identified where these areas of expertise, where they are, you would then say, okay, well, how are those institutions set up to accommodate something like an entrepreneur knocking on the door saying, hey, I'm interested in working with you guys. So you can kind of de-risk the whole concept by doing your homework on each of these institutions, because each university, let's just call it a university, and just remember, I'm talking about health sciences centers and other labs that may not necessarily qualify as universities. So let's just say a university, you can reach out to them and they will have a dedicated office for the most part to this. Now that office may be one person, or it may be 30, depending on the size of the institution. And their job is to sit there and say, okay, this opportunity has presented itself. Let's put the entrepreneur in touch with the faculty researcher and see if they can get something going. And that something could be the entrepreneur funds some research in there. Or it could be the entrepreneur kind of pokes around and says, look, I've got some cool things going on over here. I've got some market channels I've addressed. And, what over there in your lab or in your area of the department can come and help me. All right. It could be a security application. It could be some type of analytics capability. It could be some access to supercomputing, you name it. In our lasers hypothetical, it could be an experimental new high efficiency laser that gives wonderful optical or sensory qualities. And it's a better laser. And so what you'll want to do is learn more about that, because it might benefit your business. The way you do that is then that is the challenge. How do you interface and how do you get what you need without having the institution feel like they're being taken advantage of from the standpoint of knowledge transfer? Because nothing's free. And so what's in it for them? It could be research funding. It could be royalties on your sales. It could be they take a piece of your venture. All of those are mechanisms that have begun to become commonplace. And so that's what I do, is try to go in once that match has been made and the parties want to work with each other. I'll come in and help organize all of the structures that we consider to be best practices. And again, even with all that, it's still a risky endeavor.
This would be a good time to plug your website. People can learn more information. What would that be?
I'm at the law firm of Dickinson Wright, and that's dickinsonwright.com. We're a full-service law firm with about 500 lawyers. We got about 20 offices. We just announced yesterday we're opening Denver, so we're excited about that. The firm was born out of Michigan, Detroit, and it's 140 plus years old, and I think it was the firm that actually incorporated Chrysler. So
cool.
It's got pretty interesting roots way back into the automotive, golden era, and certainly is a Midwestern firm, and we have offices in Nashville and Fort Lauderdale and in certain places like that too.
Nice. All right. So Laser University. Let's say that we'll just say MIT has a laser department. I'm sure they do at some point.
I bet they do.
And I'm a laser entrepreneur and I'm going to approach them. So would it be fair to say that some of these schools have more advanced programs that are more familiar with how they would want to partner with royalties or percentages and anything? Some people have their stuff together better than others. So if I'm a laser person, I might look at 2 or 3 highly efficient laser programs at different colleges, and I'll know after interacting with them in my first interaction or 2 how mature their ability is to interface with an entrepreneur. Is that right?
Absolutely. You'll learn real quick. And look, I believe sometimes that the larger institutions may be actually more difficult to work with, that have well-established functionality for this versus maybe a smaller institution that really wants to get in the game or that has a great opportunity that they don't have a lot of, right? And they want to take that and shepherd it through. You get a lot more attention sometimes with that. So depending on what you're looking for, you may be wanting to affiliate yourself with a household name like MIT and their special laser department. You may rather want to focus on infrastructure. So, some new facility has been built at some smaller institution and they've made it very clear they're open for business. And that might actually get you further down the road than going and working with, MIT's laser department. Now, the profile of the faculty researcher, the profile of the institution is certainly, one aspect of that. If you go to an institution that's never done this before, you may put yourself in a weird spot where you're having, and you could have folks like me helping, right? But we collectively are having to educate the other side and make sure they understand exactly what it is we want. Sometimes gets to be difficult. So it's very fact sensitive as to what technology, what research unit, the nature of the office, the profile of the institution itself. All of that does factor in. And while it does seem intuitive to say, the more established, larger institutions would be the easier to work with, that's not quite always the case. Sometimes they're a little too rigid. And if you hear the term, bureaucratic, you run right into that sometimes. And it could take months to do what in the real world might take a couple weeks.
So you would, with all of that in mind, you would basically make contacts. Like if I wanted to do a first point of contact, let's say a smaller college, let's say USF, right? They're a smaller one, but they're the ones that were close to me growing up and just an hour away. So let's say I want to do something at the University of South Florida, right? And my first thing, would I first call like the main campus and ask if they have some entrepreneurial connection? What word would I use? Or would I look for a department head of lasers and call that person? Who would my first phone call be to?
You could, so if you're at like a conference and you see the faculty researcher after they give their talk, start there, throw that card, they'll know where to go. But where you can go, absent that point of contact, is to each of the offices. They'll call it a technology transfer office. They'll call it an office of research commercialization. They have various terms for it, but the terms commercialization, technology transfer, technology commercialization, variations thereof, and they usually fall under the research office. And so if you go to a website, just any university, they'll usually have an academics, administration, and a research tab. And if you click that, you'll get pretty close to where you need to go. And they all are sister offices. So there'll be a sponsored research office. There'll be the technology commercialization office. They'll all know where to send you once you drop in there. So it's, and a lot of them have their own websites that once you get to, they'll give you all the contacts. You want life sciences, call this person. You want physical sciences, call this person. you want to license technologies, call this person. They'll even sometimes give a list of technologies available for license. And so you've heard me a couple times say, the term license. That's really one of the main mechanisms for this technology transfer experience, so to speak. So it involves they will own the technology, the innovation, and they will give a license to you, the entrepreneur, to go out and hit the market with it. And that can be exclusive a lot of times, which is great, right? Because no one else is going to do it. It gives you a little bit of an advantage. So think of it like music licensing. I mean, you're in Nashville. It's a similar concept where anything you go and do exploiting that innovation, you're going to owe back a royalty. And that's typically what you'll see, at least as a starting point on how these deals get set up. Not that that's necessarily a good thing.
Do you ever see this happen? So I got to have on and talk with the CTO of NASA. At the time, it was Douglas Terrier. I don't know if he's still the CTO today, but he was a super cool guy. And he explained to me all the different cool gadgets that we have because of NASA. And then they had these technology transfer programs. Do you ever do any work with I know that universities are kind of like the government to some degree, some of them, but do you ever work with the government and private, or is it just university systems and entrepreneurs, things like that?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that actually is often, you'll see the noise of kind of the university, this little industry of university tech transfer dominate a lot of the headlines. And frankly, the working with the federal government, with the federal labs, has actually been, it could be easier, more stable, and honestly, they have a little more clarity on what their job is at the end of the day. Now, this would involve groups like NIH, National Institutes of Health, Department of Defense, DOD, Department of Energy, DOE. And they have, in recent years, essentially said, hey, we want to benefit the private sector. So from DOD's perspective, their job, they're like a $40 billion university, right? With a bunch of different labs spread across the country. And they have
paid for by tax dollars.
Yeah, paid for by tax dollars with a centralized, somewhat centralized management group. And they'll say, and they've also said, dear DOD and contractor employees, et cetera, part of our mission is to benefit public, benefit society. And the way we want to do that is by interacting with the private sector. So not only is the DOD trying to make Americans safer and to make everyone else less safe, right, by killing them, but they also want to use dual use technologies and having some of this development benefit society in different ways. And if you've ever toured some of these federal labs, NASA, I've toured a lot of them. It is mind-blowing, even from my, unclassified position, to walk some of these halls. It is mind-blowing what they have going on, ranging from, the chemical arts to industrial materials, coatings, other things like that. So it almost makes you optimistic for the future of our society when you see some of the stuff that they're coming up with.
It really does.
They definitely have these mechanisms as well.
We got to turn off the news and then go walk into labs.
Exactly.
We'll see, get our hope back. But you're exactly right. I've made an entire career out of finding, look, is my entire job to look for new, cool, emerging technology and talk to the people creating it and, talk to great leaders and people doing interesting things. And we can't even keep up. We have a whole team doing it. So as a consumer, if I'm every week saying, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Look at this new company that's doing it. Oh, they're not new. They've been around since 1929 and they have 100,000 employees, right, or whatever it is, to have these moments of, awareness and insight and new information to me, just this constant stream. I've got a research team. They send me stuff every day. There are so many amazing, cool things happening in so many different niches. Just even if you just scope it all the way down to image recognition inside of medicine,
Sure.
amazing thing happening there on like a weekly, bi-weekly basis. It's crazy.
Yes. You're kind of getting to a point where now we start throwing in advances in computing, AI being right in the middle of that conversation, and it makes everything, increase in potential, right? The developments and the discoveries that we're coming up with. My background's in plant genetics, right? I was a farm boy. Genetics are just essentially, using 4 amino acids as opposed to 2 that you see in computing. There's similarities in there, and you start seeing, how much advances we're making on the, genetics side and personalized medicine and the ability to screen, and then start coupling that with the computing arts and where that's going. It's going to be an interesting next few years, to say the least. And I'm sure your AI discussions were kind of going along those lines as well.
Yeah, that is so cool. I actually saw yesterday on my wife's car, she had a red car, and then there was this green bug thing on it, and its whole back looked like a leaf. And I got super close with the camera and took a picture of it. It looked highly detailed like a leaf. I don't know what it was, but I was super excited to see it. And I've seen animals, or the insects that camouflage themselves and that look like certain things, but this was the pixel by pixel, the closest thing I've ever seen to a leaf. This little insect. It was crazy.
That's awesome.
I don't know if you know that.
There's katydid would often, their wings are kind of vertical. They're the type of grasshopper, but I think their wing structure looks very much like a lid, but they're very green. So
looks like a leaf. Yeah, it was like green. It looked like a green leaf. Have you messed around with Midjourney, dude? Have you seen this yet?
Yeah. I mean, you can, if you poke around in Midjourney and follow some of the images and look at the prompts that develop those images, it's scary good how the machine can actually interpret those prompts to come up with amazing works.
I did it today.
Yeah.
For like the first, so I got this, and we can maybe edit around this for a second, but I wrote my first fiction book. And so I got this truck, and we're going to do a tour around the country. And so I got a truck, and then I'm getting it wrapped, and I needed inspiration for the wrap.
Yep.
And so I woke up this morning. I had never really used Midjourney. I texted a friend once, and he texted me back a Midjourney image because I made a joke, and he actually made the image. And so I woke up this morning, and I was like, all right, let's type in like Ford F-150, 3-inch lift, green, patriotic looking. And I just put like 4 or 5 words, and look what it came up with.
Whoa.
I know.
Seriously?
Yeah.
See, it's
way better than when I had seen it like a year ago. I had seen somebody post about it, and I was like, oh, that's okay. But man, they were so high def, and they knew exactly what a 2023 F-150 with a lift kit on it looked like. It was blowing my mind away.
It is insane what they can come up with. And these are, these are things that are evolving in real time. Like, I did research in May and presented on, AI as it applies to intellectual property and like who owns it, right? And those kinds of discussions. And even from then, I mean, there's a whole other data set available to us on how that's evolving. And there's a bunch of lawsuits that have been filed even since then, based on, copyright infringement you mentioned earlier. It's crazy.
Well, it's such a tough situation because I guarantee you, Lance, I mean, there are several billion, 6-7 billion people on the planet. There is somebody who, if I put their voice next to yours, sounds identical to you. There's somebody that speaks like you, that has a similar tonal quality. There just is, right? We're all familiar with the concept of like a doppelganger. So the real question is, if you have like Eminem, the musician who speaks, it's his voice. Well, if he owns that from a tonal scientific perspective of putting the voice in, speaking, like, what about the other 5 people that speak and sound exactly like him without even trying? They just wake up and that's who they are. Do they know, because he got popular first, do they no longer have rights to their very own voice? I mean, it's a real tough situation where people that look exactly like people, just because we look the same, does that mean that because you were popular first that you own that look and no one else can look like that? It's a really hard, they're hard questions because we know the answers, and it's like it's going to come down to like intent and relationship. It's going to be a real weird situation when it comes out because, you know,
Absolutely.
I should be able to make music. If I wake up tomorrow and somebody's like, oh, the music you make sounds like this other guy's music, so you can't make it. That's just not how life works.
No, it's not. And, you know, we've got examples, maybe pre-AI examples of this. You've got some music cases that have come out, probably with Ed Sheeran in particular, which that one to me, I was like, why did that even go to trial? It didn't seem to me like a copy scenario. And I can tell you there's 10 other songs that take the same beat. You know, you're right. I mean, there will always be similarities in patterns and, you know, dialects, sounds, etc. It's just the nature of the beast. And then you start throwing in creative opportunities to create things that benchmark off of recorded things like photos and videos and sounds, like some of these AI tools, Midjourney being, you know, obviously in the crosshairs of a lot of the discussion. Where does it start and where does it stop? And you've got concepts out there. Remember Google scanned all the books for the digitization? Yeah. Okay, that was deemed fair use. Okay, so now you got Midjourney using I think it's the diffusion model where it's technically copying images to then learn on. What is that, right? I don't know. It seems less overt than Google scanning books, but, you know, you may see this kind of spin, you know, the pendulum go the other way on this, because it seems like it's so unfair for artists, but yet it's so awesome and impactful potentially for society.
I just think new business models are going to emerge. I
Totally.
mean, since the beginning of time, I mean, it's basically just made everybody super rich in the following way. If I was a king in the 1400s, I could just go find the best people in the land and pay them and have them infinitely create as much as I so deemed, right? And the thing is, now we have that. Now I can go directly. I have the equivalent of a full-time graphic designer for literally pennies on the hour, right? It costs me like a couple cents per hour of computer, whatever it is for running those models. Same thing with our creative writers and the GPT systems, the chat GPT. Yep. Yeah, they're trained on these data sets, right? But then that training isn't like exactly those data sets stored. It's almost like an abstraction of it consuming that data set. And then it's learning from all of our input on top of that. How can you won't be able to trace that back, right? Like if it was one of those class action lawsuits where they're like, oh, your ad account on Facebook, you know, in 2016, you get a $5 credit because we traced it back to something. How are you going to trace back all the consumption of the internet into these models, and then the models getting compressed and compounded on top of each other, and then new learnings emerging from that? I don't think a money thing is going to come of it, but
no. And if you already see some of these early cases that are filed, they're class actions on, you know, featuring a few artists on behalf of all artists. It's like, okay, what, you know, it will maybe, you know, the damages of that appear to be more shaping policy and go forward behavior, as opposed to there's no way you can account back and give proper attribution to anyone. Was it they that created the work that's important, or we that consumed the work and thus have it featured in a, you know, popular streaming platform with more hits than, you know, my video that I you know what I mean? It's like they're going to consume the internet the way we set it up, if that makes sense, and all of the benefits and drawbacks of the way it's currently presented to any user.
How do you think this will play out from a legal perspective? And try keep it like super high level for us normal folk that don't have a legal education. Will these courts rule on these cases, and then we'll use the rulings of those cases to make, like, how do you think it'll play out from a case standpoint?
Well, okay, so the cases are starting up. In the meantime, you have some of the executives involved in the very creation of these tools saying we need reform, right? And we've all seen that in the headlines. I think what we are starting to do, we in the discussion of how does it shake out at the end of the day, intellectual property rights and generative AI tools. Europe is leading the charge in kind of policy formation. And so maybe I would say, let's all go see what they're up to and see if we can glean from that opportunities to shape our own policy. In the meantime, you've got these cases starting to mature within the court systems, and until there's a fix, right? It's not going to work. Like trying to apply old concepts of intellectual property law to these new technologies, there's a gap. Mm-hmm. And so I think the way it's going to shape out is there first needs to be some ability to fill in the gap with true policy, and then let that get tested by the courts. Because right now it's just not. I think one case that I cited in my presentation in May was a pre-AI court case where there's a monkey in a zoo that took a selfie, and they were trying to say, does the monkey own the copyright to the selfie? It took the portrait. And the court ruled, no, it has to be a human. That's what we're going off right now. That's not enough, because that makes every AI development public domain. And so we as lawyers are sitting there trying to buy companies and sell companies. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. These assets were developed partially with AI. So it gets to be really tricky.
Would it be safe to say that the economic impact will happen far before this is standard case law?
Yep, I would agree. And you've got examples of industries, kind of getting out in front of the policy and regulation, only to kind of normalize over time. There it is right there.
There's that monkey. He's looking good though.
Oh, that's a great selfie. A lot of character there, centered.
It'd be great if at the end of the photo there was like a little disclaimer that it's actually a Mid-Journey image.
Could be.
The ChatGPT got the Supreme Court to litigate it. No, I'm kidding. That's probably
don't trust anything you see. Yeah.
Have you seen the? So I like music too. You like music. Josh likes music. We're all big music fans. I'm glad Ed won that case because I thought it was absurd. I was like, gold diggers. The moment I looked, I took me 2 minutes of research into it to realize, oh yeah, it's the families of the families suing because they think they might have a. Anyway, but did you see the lawyers that ran the math and generated essentially every combination of, I think it was notes possible? Like they made every song that could ever be made or something like that.
No.
Did you see this?
I did not. No. It's got to be. No, I have not seen this.
Oh, you got to research it. Yeah. So there were these attorneys. I briefly read about it. Okay. So take it with a grain of salt. But there were these attorneys and they were constantly, litigating music rights stuff. And they said they were also, I think one of them was also a mathematician of some sort.
Okay.
And he said, well, he looked at the notes and the scales and, there's only so many, right? And he's like, so there's a finite number of combination of these in the universe. This is not an infinite number. Like this can be mathematically calculated. So they used a supercomputer. So they had the idea and they couldn't process it at the time because I think it was like the early 2000s. There wasn't enough compute to do anything with the idea. But then it moved forward, and then a few years ago it kicked back up again, and they actually processed onto a drive like every combination possible. I don't know if they did it with change in beats per minute or anything like that, but I know at least every combination of every note in every order they generated because it was just a function of math. And then they said, here you go. Like now no one owns any of this because it's all already been created. There you go, Josh. Josh got it up.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the exact one, but the number here, if you can read it, 68 billion melodies.
He made every melody got generated from his algorithm. Or whatever it was. Yep. 300,000 melodies a second.
Yeah.
Each second, yeah.
That's
so
incredible.
He just showed that all this stuff already exists. It's us just putting it together with current context and all of that in mind.
And then you put a songwriter / terrible musician like me in the middle of it, and I can only play with major chords, right? So that even further limits, and I can come up with original works just the same. It just may not sound as good, and it may just use major chords, which would seemingly further limit it. Who's the band that uses microtonal notes? There's this whole concept of notes between the notes that, and it's a known band. I just can't remember their name, but anyway, there's guitars they make that allow you to kind of play the notes within the notes, which seemingly opens the door for other notes. But again, you can take the same 3 chords and make
1, 4, 5 all day, dude. Yeah.
All day. Give it to me. Yeah. That's what I like anyway.
Right. That's what's fun. What's fun is I am proficient enough at piano and guitar to be able to just pick up and play some basic stuff with some people. And that's as far as my education's got me, right? Like I don't sit there and shred crazy solos and stuff like that, but I can jam. And that's what's fun. When I get stressed out or I call it connecting to the universe or whatever. When I just need this moment of stress relief, I can go sit down, kick up that piano and just like,
right.
I call it emoting. It sounds kind of lame, but like you can just emote through the music. It's pretty cool.
You can. And if I like to jam as well. I like to do it. My sons are finally taking it, to heart, and they're starting to get into it. And we're not really there where we can play entire songs together, but I mean, just somebody jump on a chord or a lick and let everyone just fill in, and let's keep the structure out of it. And just have some fun doing it. And it's amazing how cool that can sound sometimes when when everyone hits it the right way. There's no doubt that's fun.
Yeah, I love it. I love the music. If I'm in your part of your neck of the woods, I'll let you know. And
I need a keyboardist. We've got. So here's the deal. Just so you know, from a timing standpoint, we've got a neighborhood band we've put together. One of the front guy wants to play a gig at his 50th birthday, and nice. he's 43 right now. So we've got 7 years, Joel. So we're gonna need you down here to help us practice up.
Josh is gonna fill in for me. Josh, do you play piano?
Not well.
Not well.
No.
Just so you know, Lance, Josh crushes us all. He's like Ivy League musician when it comes to guitar. Like I heard him pick up a guitar and he made John Mayer cry. It was ridiculous.
That's some bold words right there.
It's too generous of you.
Well, if you listen to the intro music for our show, I called him one afternoon. I'm like, hey, we need a new intro music. He's like, yeah, we've been talking about it for a while. I said, we need a new intro music today. He's like, okay. I was like, can you just write something and just do it today and like get it completely done and for the next episode that's releasing tomorrow? He's like, yeah. He did it, and I was like, this is the best thing I've ever heard. It was like 5. I was like, you could do that in 5 minutes. This is crazy. We got to utilize your talent here.
And it's original. Yeah.
It's original.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can get you to the point where maybe I can come up with something and it sounds good while I'm jamming. But the minute you press record, I freeze up. I'm not the guy. I need studio guys come help me out here.
Well, you can keep making these awesome relationships between universities, governments, and entrepreneurs, and you're in the middle of changing the world. Like you're an integral part in that system of taking technology and transferring it. And I think that's a beautiful way to spend your time.
It's much appreciated. And, kind of what we've been talking about, being able to see new developments, new innovation, and trying to harness that when it goes right, there's nothing more fulfilling that I could imagine doing as a lawyer, right? But it is a challenge, and I think it really amounts to, and you mentioned the federal labs as well. It applies to them, and it amounts to early discovery versus applied research and development, and ultimately product development. And so, trying to gauge what level of effort needs to be, put on a situation now versus next year versus 3 years from now, it's a challenge. And so you've got a university that really focuses on basic research. They're not looking out there trying to compete with someone. They're just trying to make, cool stuff, make something better. And then you bring in private enterprise where their motivations are, competitive in nature, especially in a capitalist society. And so trying to talk to those two cultures at the same time and have them agree to stuff can be a challenge. And that's really where I spend a lot of time. And and when it works, like I said, it's very fulfilling.
Do you ever help at the top of the funnel? So for example, let's say some existing business owners are listening, or some technology leaders, and they want to explore this, but they don't necessarily know exactly how they want to get started. Maybe they want to call you up and say, hey, I'm curious, we're in the laser space or we're in this space, Lance. Do you know any universities do you ever help at top of funnel stuff, or do you just help once we have the relationship, we know we want to do something?
No, I do. And that's probably my favorite kind of role to play would be, and especially like we have large energy companies. I've done some speaking before, and it raised an eyebrow, and they reached out and said, we haven't worked with you. We haven't done this before, right? We understand the concept and we understand the potential for that. Can you help us? And so it was absolutely that. It was, okay, well, what are you interested in? Where's your sweet spot? Where's your competitive advantage? Where's your disadvantages? And then we go and kind of shop around for opportunities. There were a few that I knew about. There were also some that, as I mentioned before, we just looked into some areas and found some good opportunities. And that turned into a very productive set of collaborations for purposes of making their products better. And in that case, it had to do with the surface functionalization. So they had certain materials that they were, in the industry, and they wanted to make it more durable or less reactive. And so we were able to fix the problem. And guess what? They had a bunch of patents around it, so it gave a competitive advantage at the same time. So yeah, if there's an opportunity for me to take someone that has never even talked to one university and say, come with me, let me show you what, how this can help you. And we go through the process. We have some discussions with key thought leaders, right? They want to work with private sector. And in fact, all this started back in 1980. So we're not talking about an old concept here. I mean, I was born before 1980, so I'm maybe a little biased there. But this is evolving. It's continuing to evolve. And now you're seeing universities get much more comfortable with joint ventures, which to me kind of sums up how this all needs to go down. It's not a license agreement in exchange for royalty. It's like, let's everyone contribute into a new venture, and let's go off together, align our interests, align the motivations, and benefit society by watching products reach the marketplace that are, it's a better product, more efficient product. So that's the ultimate goal, and I think we're getting better and better in the technology transfer business.
I personally like the idea of joint ventures. That I've had one successful one, and it was definitely the perfect setup for a joint venture because we both had like equal contributions to the situation. And yeah, it's been going. It's 2.5 years now. It's going great. Yeah. I get checks every quarter.
Exactly.
Business runs. Yeah.
And when it works, like it's a great thing, a great concept. And guess what? It's not your family jewels. It's not you opening things up for someone else to come in and run. It's, everyone's contributing to a separate scenario, however that looks. And we all agree on who's making the decisions and who's calling the shots. And if it's, if you're wanting to just get out of the way, it's going to be designed that way. There's a lot of flexibility and a lot of, potential in leveraging a joint venture structure. And again, it doesn't have to be a new entity that you form. It can be a creature of contract where you just have a bunch of joint development agreements going around and everyone knows their role and the results we all share in.